Sophie Pedder is the Economist's Paris bureau chief, and so well placed to tell us about the significance of this verdict and potential 4-year prison sentence after the leader of what was once the Front National was convicted of embezzlement. First question, Sophie, thank you for your time. Is she likely to go to prison?
She's probably going to be given an electronic tag. That would be my guess. That tends to happen when it involves sort of senior figures like her. Nicolas Sarkozy currently wears one, for example.
Of
He's the
course.
former president of France. There is precedent for that. I don't think you'll see her behind bars. I'd be extremely surprised if that were to happen. I would just say, though, James, you need to remember that the word embezzlement is being used here. The court made it very clear that she was not accused or convicted of personal enrichment.
Of
That's the
course.
phrase they use. So it was the misuse of parliamentary funds. That is true, but it wasn't personal enrichment.
She was using money intended for one purpose for another purpose.
Exactly. It was European Parliament funds. They had these assistants who were supposed to be doing a job in Brussels or in Strasbourg. Some of them were barely seen in either of those cities, and they were using the money to for their national politics, that party politics. That was the complaint.
No prizes for guessing which British politician had his salary docked a few years ago for paying an assistant who was supposed to have been working on EU matters but probably wasn't. But that just highlights the difference between French law perhaps and English law. What's the broader political significance of this then? Because she was, I think, leading the polls, early though they may be, for the 2027 presidential elections.
You're right. I mean, the earliest polls showed her in the lead, a big lead for the first round voting. It's a two-vote system in France.
Of course.
It's hard to overstate what the significance is. It's an earthquake, political earthquake for France. She's been so much the figure that has sort of brought the FN, now called the RN, from the fringes into what's considered sort of reasonably respectable politics, to the degree that she sits in parliament. Her party, if you just take single parties by itself, is the biggest party in parliament. It's not, doesn't form the biggest bloc, but it is
Sure.
the biggest single party. So, she sits on the benches in parliament, she participates in committees, she's had vice presidencies of parliament. It's for her to be banned from running for the presidency is quite something, particularly when things were looking favourable for her. And Emmanuel Macron, as you know, can't run again. He can't run for a third consecutive term. So the way to the presidency looked clearer to her for her than it has done in either her two previous presidential bids.
And I mean, the obvious replacement is, forgive me, I've temporarily forgotten his name, the younger chap,
Jordan Bardella, yeah,
Jordan
you're right.
Bardella, who leads the party. Will he just slide over into the presidential nomination now?
Well, I think that the party hasn't really been ready for this. I don't
No.
think they were expecting, and a lot of us weren't expecting, to be honest. The harshness of the sentencing, that she was found guilty, wasn't hugely surprising,
But
but the
yeah.
sentence, it being applied immediately with a 5-year ban, that is what was requested by the prosecutors, but is quite an unusual sentence. Jordan Bardella, he's 29 years old. He is a smooth operator. He is very popular, but he's young. He'd been readying himself, I think, for the job as prime minister under the scenario that she wins the presidency. But it's quite something to think about running for the presidency itself, not just at that age, but also without very much experience behind him. So the trouble for the party is they hadn't prepared. They don't really have alternatives. It's not as if there's another sort of senior figure sitting around waiting. And just for that reason, that the party really is in some disarray, even if he is the sort of natural alternative.
Very young, actually. No, when you put it in those terms, Le Pen herself 56, and he's barely half her age. Final question is the role of Le Pen, and of course before her father, distinct from the party in the way that he was. So although her polling was high, it wasn't necessarily polling for the party, for National Rally. It was polling for Marine Le Pen.
You're right up to a point. I
Mm.
mean, she has been very popular. She's so well known. I mean, she can't walk down the street in France, possibly elsewhere either. There is a huge popularity attached to her. But Jordan Bardella is also personally very popular. There
Yes.
was a poll that came out before this court decision, which put him in third place nationally, and her in first. So he's not unknown, and I think that she's done so much of that work that we were talking about earlier in terms of making the party less of a kind of fringe extremist movement, that he would be able to inherit that. I think the problem is more a question of his own credibility, his experience, the sense that he would be very young to do this. He would be the sort of candidate you could imagine in 5, 10 years' time looking credible. But goodness, at the age of 29,
Well, yeah, no,
that's quite
absolutely.
some burden for him to carry.
It's not just policemen getting younger. We shall watch this space, Sophie. Before you go, you may appreciate this with your early correction at the beginning of this. Apparently, it's only embezzlement if it comes from the embezzle region of France. Otherwise, it's just sparkling corruption. That's from Becky.